And here we are. Thank you for joining me for another Lit Friday, Augustonians. We hope that you are and continue to be happy, safe, and well. I want to begin by thanking the Andy Warhol Museum for partnering with the August Wilson African American Cultural Center to bring Nona Faustine to your screens. Her beautiful and politically incisive photography is included in the current exhibition up at the Warhol entitled Fantasy America. Reserve your tickets and times and make sure you go see the show. I also want to thank Warhol's chief curator and curator of Fantasy America, Jose Diaz, who is with us in Zoomtopia and Zoom land. So a big thank you and hello to him. Thank you for doing all of your hard work in Pittsburgh and beyond. And just a reminder that on April 30th, we have another Lit Friday, and we have invited award-winning poets Crystal Bolson, Rio Cortez, and SJ. They'll be joining us then, and it's gonna be a reading, and we're gonna let them just share their work with you, and maybe we'll have time for questions after they read, and we can kind of spread some questions between their readings, but we just wanted to actually give you some literary encouragement and flavor as we move into the summer and we start celebrating however we've managed to make it to this point for the last year. We deserve to have some more art in our lives. And so Nona Faustine is a native New Yorker and award-winning photographer. In 2019, she was distinguished with the New York Foundation Arts Award in Photography, Brick Colleen Brown Art Prize, Anonymous was a Woman Award, and finalist in the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery Outwin Bouchever competition. Her work focuses on history, identity, representation, and evoking a critical and emotional understanding of the past, and proposes a deeper examination of contemporary racial and gender stereotypes. Faustine's work has been exhibited at Harvard University, Rutgers University, Maryland State University, Studio Museum of Harlem, Brooklyn Museum, the International Center for Photography, St. John's Divine Cathedral, the Tommy Otake Institute in Brazil, among others. Her work is in the collection of the David C. Driscoll Center at Maryland State University, the Studio Museum of Harlem, Brooklyn Museum, and the Carnegie Museum. In 2020, her work was acquired by the North Dakota Museum and the Frederick R. Weissman Art Museum in Minnesota, Brandeis University, the Johnson Museum, Minnesota Institute of Art, and the Baltimore Museum of Art. Faustine's My Country photographic series will be on view at the Andy Warhol Museum in the exhibition Fantasy America beginning this month. And so we want to welcome Nona. I always appreciate you giving me your time and energy. You always spend such great time with me when I'm like, we need to talk.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Jessica. It's great to be here. I've been, it's been, a nice distraction to have this to come through after, everything that's happened in this past year. And so I'm happy to be here.
How has your work been cathartic for you during these moments? Because I feel like your first series, White Shoes, began in 2012. And then you had the My Country series, and so many things have happened socially, politically, medically, economically in the United States and also in your personal life. And I wondered, has your work or talking about your work or presenting your work to the world been cathartic for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the first reasons I think that White Shoes came about was because of this need to channel and conjure and express and what was going on within the country and within me. And I just had this big thing inside of me that I had to get out. And so the work really was like therapy, making the work. And kind of still is. And I think that's how I kind of, as an artist, that I think that's what keeps me creating is a kind of way to use the work to push through what I'm mentally working on or working through. I'm just that kind of person. Art, I think artists are conjurers with healers not only for the public, but for ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, you'll often hear artists talk about, I had to get this out, I had this inside of me, you know, and I'm definitely that type of artist, you know. And so just going through from that and then into my country, but also the mitochondria images of my family that's coming up. I also have a show with Higher Pictures Gallery in May. Um, the third week in May is opening. And those are my family pictures. And those are the pictures that I was taking you know, for years in between, you know, or at the same time as White Shoes in my country. I work on several projects at one time. It's just, you know, who I am. And so all of it is kind of biographical in some kind of way. I think I think a lot of the work, I can't say a lot of the work, but I tend to gravitate toward artists who make work that have some kind of deep meaning or personal meaning to them in their lives. And I guess because that's how I am, you know, it's like, you know, shoot what you know, people, photographers, they used to tell photographers that shoot what you know. And I definitely became a artist and grew into that, you know. You know, there was a lot of times that I considered myself a documentary photographer, a street photographer, like when I was undergrad. And that was because I think I was just emulating, you know, other photographers, you know, and what I had grew up looking at, you know. And of course I love those photographers, I still do. But it's not until you find your voice, you know, that you really make the work that you are, you know, who you really are. And so I think I looked inside myself and I found a way to make work that was about what I knew and who I was, you know. And so that's how that happened. Yeah.
So many times I think I heard artists talk about the moment where they've gone on a long journey through experimenting in their like media of choice. And they always go, and then I had this moment that I wanted to do the thing I had always been doing, and I don't know how I missed it. And I think it's the same like as a writer, like for me, I like you read the world and then you come back to that first poetry book your grandma gave you or your mom gave you, and you're like, oh no, this is what I want to do. And it's
Yeah.
like a way of kind of knowing yourself and gaining skills. You know, you could do that if you wanted to. You have the skills, you did it.
Mhm.
But also now you can put those kind of canonized skills towards something that has to do with what your passions are, what you're exploring in your own work.
Yeah, I mean, certainly art is about exploring and experimenting, and it's a journey. And you get there through observing and looking and questioning. You know, I'm reading uh, about Jack Whitten, you know,
Mm.
and you know he's constantly, you know, detailing about how he got to the point of making these incredible pictures, you know, or it's not even it's well, paintings, you know. I don't even know how to describe them because I don't feel like they're just pictures or paintings. They're like sculptural works on canvas, you know. And so, you know, it took him a all his life to get there, constantly like looking at other painters, understanding what painting is, colors, but also tapping into his own spirituality, his history, his world history, you know, to formulate and get there to that point. So I mean, it's the same for photographers, and you know, and you know, I would think other mediums, artists in other mediums as well.
I heard him talk one time, and he was talking about experimenting with paint. And he was like, I was trying to freeze it. I was trying to make it more viscous, like make it melt. I was trying to change the state of it. I was trying to like not cause an explosion and like in the Lower East Side, Alphabet City, when I had my studio there, like explode things. Like he was like, but I was trying to figure out what the molecular structure of my chosen like media was, so that way he could create. So it's even down to like getting really, really involved in the technology of it. I remember one time you were speaking to me about when you did the photograph at the intersection of Wall Street and going with your sister to set up the equipment there to take that snapshot that looks like you took 100 shots to get to. But that means you had to have like that knowledge of the camera, and she did too, in order to be able to get it, to grab it.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredible, incredible day or morning at Wall Street. Actually, I wasn't the only one there. It was my friend Davis there who also came, and his energy was what helped me get through that whole shoot. Because I was so nervous. I mean, the adrenaline was pumping. It was like 35 degrees. It was this time of year. It was literally last week was the anniversary of that shoot, and daylight savings. And it was 35 degrees. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. And I thought I was going to die. Like, I had been in that area many times, many times before, street fairs, class trips, me and my sister running to go get on a boat, all that. But until I went there that morning and realized that I was going to be standing in the middle of the intersection naked, and usually I go and, before the day, a day or two, and spot my sites and, take a picture, mentally prepare, logistically how I'm gonna work it out. But I hadn't done that. And so when I went there, it was like, it just overwhelmed me. And so, he was late. My friend Davis was late. So it gave me, I think, some time to like, I can't, just figure it out mentally and get my courage up. And then once he came there, he's a Buddhist, he's very calm, he's this, really calm white guy, who's very spiritual. And he was like, yeah, you could do it, Nona, And so he helped me, logistically, okay, where we're going to stand. Like, we knew it was the spot related to the history of that site. And, we knew that was the site. And so, like, the camera angle, and all that. So we worked all that out. And then it was just a series of shots. I didn't get totally nude right away. I had on like this cape, and it was just a series of like tests that we did kind of quickly. And we stayed there for like 30 minutes and no one bothered us. No one bothered us. I mean, there were some people coming by. There was a group of young Black men on the corner at one point. They were looking, then they left. And it was just incredible. And I love New York for that, because New York, allows you to do your work. Like, they're not surprised by that, because they're used to seeing films and fashion shoots and all kinds of things like this. So they're not surprised at that. But I was surprised still that they didn't react to me being nude there, like totally nude there. But then it became this like spiritual thing where I just, had to tap in order to be composed and calm for the camera. I just tapped into the spiritual plane and the historical moment of it. And, I think it translated into those pictures, particularly you could see that. And, I just, it was just, I words can't even describe. I get goosebumps just like talking about it. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about history in your work, because there's this way that you always speak of your work and put within your photographs the real history, right? Like you symbolically, it has an arrivance in your work, right? With symbols, but then you're also challenging the mythic history that we have, right? And one interview you were talking about Abraham Lincoln, and you're like, he's always historicized via the narrative of saying, oh, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but it wasn't only, right, because he believed that early African Americans deserved to be free. It wasn't only that. He had his own political and military needs at the time, and his own motivations for manifest destiny, et cetera, for actually freeing African American people via the Emancipation Proclamation. And I wanted to talk about how your work negotiates that space between what's false and taught to us in a very specific way, right, to guide us toward patriotism, kind of like in public school, and then the actual history that often we have to go searching for in order for us to get a better understanding of why white supremacy exists, why racism exists, why misogynoir still exists. And I wanted you to talk about that space and how you work within it.
Well, ooh, that's a good question. That's a loaded question. That's one for an essay. Um, you know, the thing I can say about that is I've from a young age always been interested in history and social events. I was raised in a family, mother and father. They were high school graduates from the South. And I think when you are from the South, you're handed down already this larger than life history that has taken place, and you carry that with you, particularly people whose parents survived the civil rights movement and came through the civil rights movement. And my parents came through the later half of the Great Migration. So like they came to New York in the late 60s. And then they met. So I think I was handed that legacy of what it meant, to come through that. And my mother can remember her grandmother, and the stories she would tell of slavery and coming up on the plantation. And so my mom's family, particularly my mom, was a storyteller. And so I think that storytelling legacy stayed in our family. Oral history was really huge. And then so that was a seed planted in me. And then being a New Yorker, New York is one of the oldest cities in the country, right? And so you can't, everywhere you go, there's part of the past as you walk around. You got to look deep, it's there. Under the glass and the concrete and the grit and grime, it's there. And so that just put in me to read a lot about history. Like originally, I would have been an archaeologist. I almost became an archaeologist. And I think because I became a photographer, I found a way to incorporate that love of history and archaeology somehow into the work, just in the subject matters, particularly my country, examining, and also I think my history as a Black woman in this country, and that lineage, I don't know, it just all of that made me want to examine, take a look, and talk about and discuss through my work that myth of America, that fantasy and what is real, what is not, and just the impact it has had on us in a kind of and I think that Black Americans and Black artists in a way it's a gift that we share and able to interpret the history and conjure these works that talk about America and our past, and who we are within all of that. So that's my question to that. I know it needs more examination and longer, but we only have but so much time.
Well, you also address freedom in your work. And I think that probably more than ever, at least in my lifetime, the major question for a lot of people is, what is freedom? Because for a long time, so many activist movements and social movements have been balkanized around like ethnic and racial groups. And now we have academics and activists trying to figure out, well, how do we branch our sociopolitical needs and rights as humans in the world together in order to move towards a future or futurity that is about freedom. And so the conversation is, well, what is that? Is freedom having the same privileges as white people? Or is freedom a total overhaul of the system so that way it's impossible for it to reproduce the oppressions that have arrived from it? Then there's the further debate of, well, is it really embedded in the Constitution and the structure of our system, or is it who's running the system? Does the representation need to change? And so I wanted to ask you what your work imagines of freedom, because I think that there is a future signaling in your work. I actually had the opportunity to write a paper about the White Shoe series, and the beginning images, or what I structured as the beginning images of the body washed on the rock, washed up from the slave ship on the rock. And I was like, this is like a reverse narrative from the Octavia Butler novel, where her character returns in history to slavery. This is the opposite. This is the enslaved African Black woman somehow leaving the ship and through water, arriving in the future to see the future consequence. And that's how I read the photos throughout. So I see the future there. And I think your work tries to reach for that and touch on that. And so what is the freedom of the character in your work when you're thinking about what you're creating?
What is the, say that again?
What is the imaginary of like freedom? Like what does freedom, how does freedom look in the future of your work? Like as your work represents the future, how does freedom look now with the debate of how we move forward and make possibly the country better, especially in terms of those debates?
I mean, I think for me, freedom as an artist is to make whatever work that you feel is necessary to make, to have the ability to do that without being questioned or alternative motives or, you know, your sincerity, to make the work that you feel you need to make. And like I always said, you know, in White Shoes, like, you know, people used to say, is she, are you playing a slave? You know, and I would always say, I'm not a slave. I am me now in the present. I am a free woman. And this is me in solidarity with those enslaved people, with those people who built this country and this great city of New York. And so I feel like, you know, all the work that I'm making, and I don't think that artists should be held back in any way from making the work they feel. So I think that's to me is freedom. But thinking about freedom, there's something that, you know, I heard Nina Simone say, and I'm always, you know, going back to or reminded of some of the things she used to say about being an artist and making work. And she was like, you know, when someone said, what does freedom mean to you? And she said, you know, you can't describe it. It's like being in love and telling someone who's never been in love before what that feels like. You can't describe it for your life, you know. But I think that as an African American, and particularly as an artist, we have defined for America what freedom is, and that every generation makes sure to make their mark on the country and to show the world the price of freedom and how to fight for freedom. And I think that's the important thing that we are doing as a people, that we have shown people the price of freedom, what it means, and how to go forward to continue that fight. And I think particularly what Democrat Representative Park Cannon did yesterday in Georgia and was arrested for knocking on the door of the chambers while the Senate, the governor of Georgia designed the most vicious, evil act to take away voting rights from mostly Black people. Let's face it, because that's who won the election, is the demonstration of the price and what African Americans have sacrificed and the meaning of freedom. And certainly that trickles down to the way I've been able to live my life. I am the first in my generation, in my family, to have the ability to stay home with my daughter when after she was born, to decide I'm going to be a working artist and be exclusively that. Um, my mom, who was a blue collar worker, telephone operator, pushed me to continue art, even when I thought I couldn't do it anymore and it wasn't for me. She did it. So all of that comes out of freedom, and I've been blessed with that. So, you know, that and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful, and hopefully I can pass on that to my daughter. You know, so I hope that answered a little bit of your question.
No, definitely. It definitely answered my question. And I want to double back to something that you said too, where you were mentioning that freedom to you is to be able to do what you like as an artist, especially as a Black woman. And it made me think of, the Hortense Spillers article, Mama's baby, Papa's maybe. And she says at the beginning, like, and I'm paraphrasing, she was like, the Black woman, even my body, is overdetermined. We are always overdetermined by what people exterior to us within and outside of our community think about us. Yeah. We're always subject to the fear of appearing like a Jezebel or a Sapphire or a Mammy or fulfilling one of the stereotypes. And it's something that we have to negotiate inside of us. And I recall during all of my research about your work, in an interview, someone asked, why the nudity? Which for me kind of implied on the back end that there's a supposition that it should not have happened, right, to ask the question. And I wondered where it came from. And then I stopped and I wondered immediately around the question of how you negotiate what you intend and what is put on your work as a Black woman who's sharing not only her visual imagination, her eye, her perception, that's a form of vulnerability to show people how you see the world. But also in your first series, White Shoes, it was kind of an offering of your body to the work to get the point across. And I wonder how you balance with making those decisions and kind of getting to the point where you're working, where you can just do like this and just shoo away all of the fear of, because that's something else Nina Simone said, freedom is no fear. No fear. How do you get to that Nina Simonian no fear when you know the questions are going to come? Why the nudity?
Oh my God. I mean, I had to really soul search. It wasn't something that I just was like, oh, I'm going to take my clothes off. I mean, Spencer Tunick was, a white artist who do a lot of nudity. Certainly nudity in art is a old topic, but for Black women, it's a taboo. Black men and women, it's a taboo topic in art because of the history of the way our body's been used in society, but also in art, or not per se in art, like, those first images that the Harvard Peabody Museum owns of enslaved Africans on a plantation in South Carolina in 1850 are some of the first images you see of African Americans, right? And they're stripped nude. And so then that history, of debasing and putting the Black body on display, it's with you. It's with you throughout the decades in life. So how do you get there? And I had to think a lot about what it is I was trying to say, and was it worth to go ahead with it despite that history and despite how it would make some people feel. And I did get, once the images went viral and everything, I did get, some pushback in the comment sections of certain things. I do read the comment sections. I know they totally tell you not to, but I did. And some Black men, one even wrote, made a video post about it on YouTube, calling me out. And so the standards are different for Black women or Black people in doing this kind of work. But I felt it deep in my soul. I felt it was so necessary. I felt like, if you're going to talk about um, slavery, if you're going to talk about what has happened in this country, what is still happening in this country, that's what made me go there. Because at that time, when I first started the series, 2012, 2013, Black women and men were being killed, and children were being killed. And even though President Obama was still, was in office, it still was like, um, we were still in this kind of utopia of having a Black president. And I'm like, wait a minute, and it was, and it almost became like a protest, using my body as a protest. But then there was this part of me that was like, it was about joy. Like I said, I had just had a baby, and I was really feeling my womanhood, and I had never did anything like that, and I felt like I wanted to celebrate who I was at that moment, and talk about freedom. Yes, it was about my freedom at that moment, as a Black woman. But it also was, like I said, in solidarity to those people who were put on display. My people, my ancestors put on display. And I felt like if you were going to talk about it, you had to have put yourself on the line. Going out in the street naked as a Black woman, that's you're risking something. I felt like you had to risk something in order to do that. And so it just I felt it also lent. I had never seen anyone on the walls of museums with my kind of body type. And I felt like that was, in a way, it was like in your face, like like I was like, it was all these emotions. I was like, I was angry. I was happy. I was joyful. I was proud. I was all these things, and I was feeling all those things, and I was like, I knew there was power within me, and in seeing a body like mine, and I just utilized all that, So that's a long answer.
No, I could listen to you talk about, just talk like all
Like now I
all
see,
day.
like now I see women like on Instagram, big girls on Instagram and like Facebook, doing the nudity now. I mean, and I'm glad, I'm happy, but I don't know how easy it is for them to go there. But I know for me, it was an examination and a search that took a lot, and it meant a lot for what I was doing, what I felt it was doing. And somebody, a professor at Maryland State University at the Driscoll Center, they had all these talks, and she categorized the picture as one of my pictures, over her dead body. She did this whole talk about what it means, Black women at play, that when they're, being nude in the street, it's kind of taking charge and taking back. And that's another thing that I felt I was reclaiming, that negative image of those enslaved people, the way their image was taken without their consent, but I was reclaiming that, which was taken and disfigured, so to me it was not just about pain, but it was about joy, and it was about freedom, it was about power. I had the power to do that.
It always and I one of our participants, but one of our viewers says, I always want to ask them, why does me looking good, looking correct or intelligent make you afraid, in reference to thinking about, Black women's representations and individualized representation of themselves, like in life and in the world. And I always think about what Malcolm X said, right? I think Nelson Mandela also said, and he might have been quoting him, where it's like, you can determine where a civilization is by how they treat their women. And so I think about how much people use Black women's bodies as this kind of post from which they decide to stack themselves or measure themselves in terms of needing a Black woman to be or fulfill a certain amount of stereotypes, so who they want to be socially can be justified on a hierarchy, rather than them taking responsibility for their own individual choices and their identities. There needs to be like something stacked where Black women are at the bottom, and then everyone else gets to step atop by saying, well, this, I'm not this. And there's this control, right? It's like a social kind of control. And I think I found it the most when Chloe Bailey did the, what'd she do? I'm sorry, I'm really bad at social media and I apologize for that, everyone. She did the Bus It Challenge, where, you are in like your house clothes and then they play the song and then you kind of like are dancing and you're really, really dressed up. She received a lot of negative commentary about being free in her sexuality, being free in her expression of her sensual and passionate self. And she actually she submitted almost an apologetic video on social media where she was trying to explain, well, I do this because for such a long time, I felt like I didn't have access to my body and who I was. I felt like I wasn't desirable to myself or anyone else. And it just always reoccurs. There are always these public conversations about the Black woman's body as being a source of rejection, as being rejected if it cannot be controlled.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that were said, when that body of work came out, particularly from Black people, is that oh, you have a lot of nerve. Who do you think you are? Taking off your clothes. Look what you look. You don't look how you look. Then there was pushback from some Black men who I took it as we still haven't dealt with the fallout of the way Black women were treated in slavery and abuse. And I feel like there's still a lot of guilt over it from Black men, that they were not able to protect us, and it should be no shame on their part. I mean, come on, but it's there. I feel, and that's my interpretation. That's my personal interpretation, that there is still within our community. And so when you see a Black woman, whether in whatever context it is, nude like that, I think it triggers something in the mind. And not just Black men, I think Black women too. And certainly, there was another young woman who talked about she had been abused sexually, and it triggered something in her seeing me like that. Whether I was there at my own will or not, it made her shame. And there's a lot of shame in our community around the Black body. And it is because of the way we were used and abused in slavery. And it follows us. And then there is the whole issue of pornography. The way when you see a naked Black woman, it has been traditionally in a pornographic context. And so I had to correct the young woman who I was on a radio show, who I thought understood the work and what we were talking about, but yet referred to it as soft porn. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. How you need to? And I was like, first of all, it's the way it's not soft porn, and the history of nudity in art. How can you see the history of nudity in art and see nude bodies, white nude bodies in art, but when you see a Black body in art, and clearly the way I'm standing is not, and the poses is not pornographic, but yet you feel it's soft porn or call it soft porn. So there has to be a kind of education or re-educating one to seeing the Black body in different contexts and what it actually means, you know. So there's that.
And also thinking about how dehumanization inherently includes being hypersexualized.
Right.
Frantz Fanon wrote about this, the Afro-Caribbean philosopher, and he was like, people see Black men and they think of genitals. It's like, it feels like you're just, it like the almost a quote, you know, you feel like that's all people see is the hypersexualization of your body, because during slavery, it wasn't only Black women that were sexually brutalized regularly. It was
Right.
also Black men. And then dealing with the strict gender binary in the United States, where men aren't even allowed to talk about that, especially if you're hyper masculinized as Black men. How do you come to healing and then do that with the other, you know, genders of your community when you're constantly dealing with trying to kind of take off these layers that are kind of put on you, and you almost feel like you have to arise to the occasion in order to survive. And I think that that's like another aspect of our history that we have been, but we'll arrive at a point where those shorelines where we can talk about those things. I think, and I think a lot of your work kind of catalyzes that. In another interview, you mentioned what art does. And I think that's what your art does. It catalyzes people into thinking about these things, even if their reactions are rejective in the beginning, at least it's gotten them there to thinking, right? Unfortunately, like you had to correct the young woman on the radio, it's sometimes at your expense as an individual body walking into a room to talk about your artwork. But then also, I think about the framing of your work too. And so my country is at the Warhol now in Fantasy America. And I wanted to talk about that line because people are fascinated with the obstructive gradient, the line that's in your work. And people have called it, I refer to it in my own writing as a frequency, right? It's the opening frequency cutting through the monuments of all of those oppressed voices that are shouting out, and it's creating a visual reverberation. I've read another writer talk about that. You've mentioned it as an obstruction, but another writer spoke about it as kind of like an illusion in the eye. Like there's something blocking your view, almost like you have a floater that's kind of cutting across your eye. So this line in my country has been theorized and talked about in so many different ways. And I want you to talk about it some more. And I mean, I think it opens the work, but it's a fascinating project. And you've told the story so many times about the first photo of the Statue of Liberty, and tell it again, because it's a wonderful, beautiful, amazing story, but also like, how do you think about the line? What else does the line represent?
You know, my work is so multi-layered that I can come up with one idea or meaning to it, and then later on it opens itself up to multiple layers of meaning, and it's fascinating to me. You know, artists, we make the work, and then it goes out into the world, and it takes on this new meaning, and it's always so fascinating to me. Um, I was on the Staten Island ferry going to an opening at the Staten Island College. And, you know, as you always do, you photograph the Statue of Liberty, you know, or these iconic monuments. You just, how could you not pass the Statue of Liberty and not photograph it, right? And so I did. And I did, and I didn't see the bottom of the frame of the window that I was photographing through. It had cut the pedestal off, so that was that black line, and I just snapped it. Something instinctively, you know, said snap it. I could have cropped it up or cropped it down or zoomed out past it, but I don't know, for some reason I left it. And I think I like when things like that happen. I think uh, in my mind, I kind of knew, and I was just, you know, open to experimenting and tricks and this and that, you know. So I just snapped it. And then when I got home and I opened it up, I was like, and I'm always looking for like meanings in the land, and things like that, and just multiple meanings. And so I was like, it just, when I saw it, it just was like, it made me gasp, because like I said, for me, it felt like it was before the election 2016, and for me it was like a premonition of what was going to happen in the country, that we were going to be losing freedoms. But it also, like I said, felt to me of another dual meaning of the history of the statue, which was made for to commemorate the ending of slavery by France. It was a gift to France, to the United States, for the commemoration of us ending slavery and fighting the Civil War. So
And there is an art historical argument that the Statue of Liberty is based off of a Black model.
No, it is. It totally is, and that's in the Statue of Liberty Park. They used to have that, and it's an Egyptian barber woman, Black woman, that supposedly was the original model for the Statue of Liberty. Okay, I'm using my hands like a New Yorker. Sorry.
No,
But
I love
yeah,
it. I missed it.
so that's but then you go back to the meaning of the Black line. Like for me, I was using it, like the Black line, I was using it as all this information, a conceptual tool that signifies, information that is missing. you know it's kind of also analog, definitely harks back to my black and white days. All those things that you learn over the course of your life as an artist or a scientist or whatever, but particularly as an artist, they all come into your work. You think that you've left them by, but they find a way to get the way you see the world, the way you think. It all goes into that work. And when I look at it, it reminds me of that. It literally of analog. My daughter is of the digital age. I was the last of the analog babies. So I think that TV, when we used to look at TV and you get that line when the TV starts to break down and break up in the screen and the image, that's what I think about. But then Anton Sargent, we did this talk at Two Palms, New York, and that's who I collaborated with, the silk screens of white shoes, of My Country. And he talked about the Black line being reminiscent of Roy D. Cadava's work, his black and white work. And it just was like that. Roy was definitely one of the photographers that I loved and was influenced by in my own black and white work, which was different. My documentary, my portraiture. And that's probably what also I saw when I saw that Black line, a relationship to that work. But I will leave it up to the art critics and others to further decodify what that is. But I would say that I was also reading, about the Civil War, about Black history, about our involvement in the Civil War, and all of that was what triggered, again, our American history was what triggered that.
And often our bodies being made the first line, right? Like during going into the trenches, a lot of times Black soldiers were made the first line.
But it also, growing up, I was extremely patriotic, and I think I still am. And I think, for African Americans, there's this deep love for the ideals of America that we fight and hold. Without us, we are the ones that really hold the country to those principles and have embodied those principles and made America live up to those principles. Certainly, so many of our leaders, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, so many of the, Harriet Tubman, they made, us live up to those ideals. Frederick Douglass, I mean, Sojourner Truth, those founding mothers and fathers are who made America live up to that promise that's in the Constitution, all the while it's stating we were 3/5 of human beings. So I think it's my love and examination of the country, but also looking. I think each of us in that show in Fantasy America is thinking about what America means for us. And certainly Andy Warhol was doing that. Those pictures that he has also of like protesters in the streets of civil rights movement, dogs being sicked on protesters. He wasn't just like, about Marilyn Monroe and all the celebrities. He was also in a lot of his work looking at the real America. Also those pictures of Jackie O during, JFK's funeral. But certainly he was looking at a lot of other scenes in America that depict that theme. And I think that's what we have in common.
So what I also know that you were interested in Glenn Lee John's book project called America. And now you're in an exhibition that's based on Andy Warhol's photo essay book, America, and you're in the exhibition Fantasy America. Could you talk about the continuity between those projects and your like kind of journey with them, like going with them as an artist?
You mean Glenn Ligon's work?
Ligon, that's right, Glenn Ligon, excuse me.
His work and my work? Wow. I mean, he's someone that I also highly admire and look up to. Yeah, I mean, I think Glenn Ligon is also, he's not only looking at America, but asking questions, relevant to his time and what it means to be an American in his own way. Certainly, I'm doing that. I'm trying to find my own path, spurred by my internal feelings, my history. I think that it's work that is necessary for us to do so. And then I think there will come a moment, and it's probably already here, when I think African American artists will begin to somehow move away from that, the political, the social, the racial, and make work that's. I think we're totally trying to free ourselves in many ways, you know. Um, but I think African American artists should be able to make any work that they feel is necessary. But I think because of our place in society, I think it's the time that it's something that needs to be said and done, and it's like an elephant in the room. How can you ignore it? You know what I'm saying? And I'm just so proud of how we are going about it. Sometimes you can just make the work and you don't even have to say anything about what it means. It could just exist, and it could have multiple meanings. Like sometimes, like when people, for instance, I had two European women early on in the work look at the white shoes, and they were like, it reminds me of sculpture. They didn't even, so I mean, they knew, they felt it was political, but then they didn't. I don't say my work is political. I actually hate labeling work, or labeling other people's work, or labeling my work. I will not call my work political or anything like that, or social. I mean, if it fits, it fits, but I really don't like to label it. But anyway, they felt like it talked to sculpture, and that's certainly an influence in my work. Sculpture, African sculpture, Greek sculpture, And then particularly using my body, I thought a lot about that formulating, but also in my country as well. Architecture and sculpture are two biggies in that body of work. And so I utilize all of that, film, definitely. And so I utilize that, and painting. I have this new interest in painting, and I want to learn and take up painting now. And so I went out and bought all these books about abstract painters. And I think it's kind of it's in there, it's in my work. And so I hope to, particularly in my country series, there's some new pieces that have gone really into the abstract. And I'm just loving that. And I'm excited. And I can't wait to see where that takes me, particularly the piece of Stonewall Jackson. Like that, I felt like that was a breakthrough for me. Mm-hmm. And Robert E. Lee and Charlottesville, I feel like those were a breakthrough for me. And so I'm really excited about that.
So expand on that, because that is, unfortunately for us, like you're our last question. It's what's next? What are you working on? What do you imagine for yourself next? You say you're working on abstract painting. Remind us what you said before about your familial photographs going up. Where is your imagination taking you? Are you looking forward to perhaps a day when your work doesn't have to draw on the political and history that it does? What's your imagination doing? And also, someone wants to know where your work can be purchased. Is your work available for purchase? I really love the piece, "Oh No, the Devil Never Lies" from Kia Tomlin.
Yes. My work can be purchased through Two Palms, New York. And they have a website, Two Palms. And so you can, my country, if you, and the mitochondrial, which is family images, are going up in late May. I'll post on my Instagram and Nona Faustine photography page on Facebook. I have my website is down right now, but anyway, I'm working on it. But just inbox me on Instagram if you're interested at Nona Faustine, in anything else. So what's next? Right now I am working on a series, or I hope to be a series, Demeter and Persephone. It's a retelling of the tale. And one of the images has been acquired by the Baltimore Museum. It's really a really big image. But the series, I've done some work around it, and I'm still, this weekend, hope to do some more. And like I said, I'm always working on I feel like I'm never finished with my series. And so like I add to them as I feel inspired to. That may not be the best way of working, but that's how I go about it. So when I get tired of one series, I'll go to the next, or when I have something to say about that, and go, move along. And then I haven't begun any abstract paintings yet, but I'm learning and researching and reading, and I have some ideas. And so it'll be something that is only mine and mine personal. And when I'm ready to share it, if and when, I'm not putting any kind of pressure on myself. It's just like for play, because, I've never taken up painting in my life, but I just feel, I feel like it's something that I can do. And particularly at the silk screens that I've made and the interest that I've had over so long, that I feel like it's something I want to explore. So those are some of the next things. And I'm doing a residency at Stoneleaf in the summer, and I hope to, explore some of those mediums while I'm there.
Well, you have 150% of my support, and I will definitely be there when you decide that you're ready to share. A big reminder, April 30th, we're gonna have poets, award-winning poets, Crystal Bolson, Rio Cortez, and SJ join us, and they're gonna, you know, give us some magic. And also, Jose Diaz dropped the link in the chat, but Fantasy America also has an exhibition catalog that I am very honored to have contributed to, but I'm also in the catalog with Jose himself and also poet, activist, and Black critical theorist, Alan Palias, who's also in the catalog that we wrote together. And so support that as well, see the exhibition, keep up with Nona's work, follow her on Instagram, and follow us on Instagram, and then meet us back here on April 30th, and we'll be happy to see you.